Alrighty, we are live, officially live, going out on our website and YouTube and on LinkedIn Live right now. Thank you to those of you that are joining us live. If you're watching this as a recording, thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to our conversation today. We have a fantastic group of people joining me today, and probably the event of the year that I've been most excited about. It's certainly the thing that I'm most passionate about, and I think it's a topic that plays a huge role in the success of outbound teams. Today, we are talking about building a high-performance outbound sales culture. So we're really focusing in on that culture piece. It's a word that gets bandied around a lot. And so we're going to explore that today. And I've got 4 absolute superstars with me today that are going to help me talk about that. So without further ado, I'll do some quick intros and then we'll talk about the format for the conversation. And in no particular order other than this is how I see them on my screen. First, we've got Sean Hayes. Sean is the Director of BD for EMEA at Aircall. We have Neil Buyan, who's the SDR Manager at Happio. We have Joanna Costa, who is the Outbound Team Manager at Funding Circle in the UK. And Danielle Benavides, who's the Sales Development Manager for Tipalti. Is it Tipalti or Tipalti? Did I say that right?
You can say either or.
Either, doesn't matter. Love that. Flexible branding. Guys, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be chewing the fat on culture, particularly within an outbound team, the role that it plays, why it's important, what are the benefits of it, why we should spend money on it, why we should focus and spend time on it. We may get some questions from the audience. If you're watching this, fire your comments in. I will throw those questions at the audience throughout as and when I can. And we're going to try and get straight into this topic today in just a few minutes. Before we do that, though, I'm going to work in reverse order. Danielle, could I come to you first? Can you just give us a quick, really sort of broad brush? Who's Tipalti? What do you do?
Okay, so Tipalti, we're a financial tech company in financial operations. And so we are headquartered in San Mateo, California, but we have offices in London, Israel, Dallas, Vancouver, as well as Toronto.
Nice stuff. And how many in your sales development team?
Over 50 plus and growing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Joanna, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I work for the sales development team at Funding Circle. There's a team of 8. Funding Circle is the #1 peer-to-peer lender in the UK. So we service thousands of businesses. We focus on the small and medium business. And that's kind of like our niche. We're very proud of being super personable. And honestly, the outbound team just like starts off that relationship really, really well. So we're super proud. Sorry, that is my talking in the background.
Good stuff. Neil, your turn.
Thank you. So Neil Buyan, SDR Manager for Happio. Happio is a Finnish SaaS company. We provide a social intranet platform to help employees connect globally and make people happier at work. Currently managing around 9 SDRs as of next Monday. And we have offices in Amsterdam, New York, Finland, and also Romania as well. Thanks, Neil. Sean, last but not least.
I'll try not to be least, as you say. So, hi, Sean Hayes, Director of Business Development for EMEA at Aircall. Aircall are a phone system that's actually designed for sales teams. So it's quite nice because we're used by a lot of SDRs. I mean, from an SDR manager point of view, many struggle with teams making enough calls, being able to pass on best practice in terms of having call recordings, tracking performance, and also they often rely on dialers which have bad call quality and calls drop out, which can lead to loss of revenue. And Aircall are really just for SDR teams that are serious about making calls and want to make the most of the phone channel. That's when they come to us.
Nice, good stuff. So, Sean, I'm going to stick with you. How many have you got in your own outbound team?
In EMEA for outbound, we have about 25.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So I'm going to stick with you first because I'm going to start firing some questions over and pick people to answer them. So let's look at your culture, and it's about 25 in EMEA. How quickly has that gone to 25? Because I think you've grown pretty quickly, haven't you?
Yes. I mean, so I joined 2 years ago and we had about 15. Okay. Scaled up slowly but surely. And a lot of people needed Aircall over the last year, 18 months. So we had to get more BDRs to actually serve that need.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look at the word culture, How do you define that in your team? What does it mean to you?
There's unwritten rules, I think, of culture. There's also those that can be written, but I mean, to me, it's actually just about happiness. That's honestly like the number one word we use. We think about the idea that if you're happy, you'll work hard and then you'll be successful, rather than working hard and being successful and then you'll be happy. We put happiness first, and it's kind of everything we do is geared towards happiness.
Nice. I think it's a really good start and a good answer. Danielle, I'll come to you next. How about you? How do you define and talk about culture within Tipalti?
For me, I think culture is also feeling a sense of being together. So family, it's about supporting one another and really having a goal that you're all working towards and celebrating both the wins and also just really supporting each other when you're kind of feeling down.
Yeah. Neil, a question for you. So as a leader, you've got people in the team who are doing, let's face it, a tough job, right? Outbound is hard. We know that. And it takes a certain character, and typically, you know, we've got to deal with rejection, ups and downs. There's a lot more turbulence in the day-to-day of an outbound sales role than there might be in a, I don't know, technical role or whatever it might be, or a project management role, albeit they see that to some degree. How much of your time are you focusing on culture? How much is it something that's on your agenda that you're proactively working on versus it being just something that happens?
Yeah, really good question. So continuously working on it, I think day to day from each meeting and every interaction that you have with the team. To your point, this is a very tough job, and it does take a lot of, you know, mental capacity to try and deal with the amount of rejection that an SDR goes through. And I think what's really helped me learn is great managers that I've had in the past. So I've had one manager that says you kind of have three roles when you're leading a team. So the first one is obviously being a manager, and you've got the operational day-to-day stuff, helping them with tools and processes, etc. Secondly, you're going to be a coach. So you're going to be teaching the new players, especially if they're a new hire and they've never done tech sales before, and allowing them to try things out, fail, and then obviously give them guidance off the back of that. And lastly, you're kind of like a therapist. So each week you're having your one-to-ones with your teams. You want to hear about their, you know, the problems, their fears, their blockers, their challenges, and you want them to be able to come to you and approach you to discuss these without fear of, you know, being like hit on the back of the head for not doing X, Y, and Z. So I think by emulating that as a manager, then with your team leads and the rest of the team, they can kind of see, okay, if that's the vibe my manager's giving, then that's what they want to carry out throughout the team with their other team members as well.
Yeah, nice. John, I come to you. When you think about the culture at Funding Circle, when I say your culture, define it, tell me about it. What are the things that first come to mind?
I would say sense of belonging. It's probably the first thing, and it's certainly something that that actually made me want to be part of Funding Circle when I joined almost 4 years ago now. Came to the office and I just instantly felt like I belonged there. And we try really, really hard to make sure that every single person in not just the SDR team, but also like in the wider team, feels like they align with who we are as people. We have like 5 pillars. One of them is be open and stand together. It's just two of for me, the most important ones. And there's another one that I quite like, which is live the adventure. It's about embracing that it's not always going to be smooth sailing. We are going to have challenges. And typically whenever I have a new team member, one of the first interactions that I have with them is just accept change is happening, just embrace it, and just say, you know what, let it come. We're up for the challenge. But yeah, and a sense of purpose as well. I think everyone agrees with what we are doing. We are helping SMEs, and funny enough, the new joiners have this like really big sense of purpose, and I think that really fits well in the culture. But like Neil and Sean were saying, it's really really important to let them fail, but at the same time, have not a no blame culture. Let them fail, and then analyze why did you fail, what we can do better, and just being like that kind of nurturing environment outside.
Yeah. Danielle, can I come back to you? Because I think you said you've got about 25, was it 25 or 50 in the sales development team? I can't remember the number you gave me.
Yeah, we have over 50.
Over 50, and Sean's 25, isn't he? So over 50, that's happened over a period of time. there's such a thing called culture creep, or what I refer to as culture creep. So your culture looks like this today. 2 years later, you check in and look at it, and you go, oh, wow, that changed. Sometimes you get lucky and culture changes for the good, right people, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it just evolves day to day because you are evolving as a business and processes change, systems change, and you end up checking in at a certain point and going, oh, we've lost control of that. You know, we're not looking at it the same, and actually we're not getting the same culture output, so to speak. I'm guessing there are some times across that journey where you guys have had to check in and either acknowledge that we're okay with it, it's good, or just reset a little bit on things around culture. Can you maybe give us some thoughts around that?
Yeah, sure. So I would say back in 2020 is when we really did make that huge jump. I joined in 2019. I was probably 1 out of the 8 SDRs, and then I became a manager. And since then, it's boomed. And so for our company, we do culture amp surveys, which is usually every 6 months to a year. And it also focuses on our own department. So what we do is when we do get feedback, whether it's positive or negative, like for example, back in 2020, when we're working from home, we really wanted to understand, like, okay, here are the things that we're doing well. What can we do to become better? And so we held like focus groups with our SDRs who led it so that they can really talk about what they want to expect from working from home. And we took that and we were able to better our training, better not just like virtual happy hours, but what those celebrations look like too. So for example, when we were in the office, we would do like quarterly celebrations, like SDR of the quarter and more, but we actually took it in our own hands and we do our own SDR celebrations each quarter, where we also invite like the VPs, the C-level executives to also recognize SDRs, of how well that they're doing, but also highlighting each team, whether they're inbound, outbound, allbound as well. So I would say with the culture and who we've been hiring, we definitely are very open and transparent of this is what to expect. And then we do our own check-ins of like, hey, I know that you've been here for 3-6 months now. Like, is Tipalti still what we described to you first, and how can we make that better?
And Neil, I'll come to you. Thank you, Danielle. To what extent should we be, I guess, allowing what I referred to earlier as culture creep, or encouraging it, or reviewing and changing it, versus trying to keep a core culture that we believe in and keep that consistent as we grow a team?
Good question. I think the simple answer is change is good. So I've worked in a lot of companies where, you know, being a hiring manager as well, we're looking for new SDRs. And typically working with VPs of sales, we're looking for the next similar Mark, or we're looking for another John, or we're looking for another Helen. And my kind of feedback to that is, then our team really won't grow. So when I'm hiring, I'm looking for different personalities to kind of diversify the group that we already have. So for example, in the last couple of months, I've hired somebody that was originally a TV presenter, somebody that used to work in theatre. I had somebody that ran a family business. And the reason I do this is they may have traits or qualities that do not exist in our current SDR team today, and they're going to kind of bring a new flavor. And then when you mix those different cultures together, it really can bring about, you know, new things in the team, make them more creative, try different campaigns. And I love watching this flourish. Obviously, you do want to have your sort of core values, you know, like respecting each other. Happiness is a key thing here at Happier as well, that, you know, we want to make employees happy. And having check-ins with the team through surveys every 3 months or 6 months or so, and continuously getting that feedback. So I always want to make sure that my team are happy with certain team members. And another thing that we do, for example, like when we're attending remote meetings, is that we ask for to be on camera, you know, share out what's been going on the weekend as well, and, you know, try to influence each other, because we're doing different regions, we're doing different languages. And that's one of the things that attracted me to this company, because we have over 25 different nationalities, and every day you're talking to somebody in a different country. I think it's beautiful. But from the top up, with our CEO, I asked him a few months ago, I was like, how do you see this company changing? And he said, from 2 or 3 years ago when we launched, it's a completely different model. It's a different business, but he loves that. And that's kind of what I agree with as well. Nice.
Sean, and it's interesting, Neil's touched on something there, which, you know, to a degree you could define as diversity, and diversity comes in all different shapes and sizes and forms, and it's people with different ways of thinking, it's people from different backgrounds, different languages, different cultures, all those sorts of things. What role does diversity play in defining your culture at Aircall, and to what extent have you gone out and looked for that, embraced it, encouraged it, or I'm just keen to get your thoughts around that topic.
Well, we have around 35 or so nationalities working at Aircall. I think actually one of the biggest struggles when I came in was we had our team in EMEA split between Northern Europe and Southern Europe.
Yeah.
And there's like, I don't know, 8 or so BDRs in each. We didn't work in silos as such, but we weren't one EMEA function. But then even within Northern Europe, you've got the UK and Ireland, you've got DAC, you've got Benelux, you've got Nordics. There's different perspectives we can get from each other, but there's also, we're working and selling into different markets. When I'm trying to be consistent with the number of calls that can be made, well, in one market it works really well. In the Nordics, for example, we have loads of numbers. In DAC, it didn't work as well because we didn't have as many numbers at that time, and it was actually really hard to be consistent within that kind of team. So what we've done is we've kind of had more specificity now. So we split it into the different regions. So we've got that specificity within each one, but then we all have kind of one direction we're moving in as EMEA as a whole. So we want, basically we embrace and we want diversity, but we also kind of want everybody to, this sounds weird, but we want everybody to work in with specificity for each region as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'd get nods around the room, I'm sure, if we said diversity is a positive thing for sales teams, and probably for any team, because we get different ideas, different approaches, all that sort of stuff. I think probably the biggest misunderstanding with diversity, in my opinion, is that it's people think about diversity and then categorize it based on one thing. So nationality, gender, race, culture, whatever it might be. Actually, diversity is about all sorts of different things. So it might be that if you're hiring people in one physical location, you can't achieve the nationality diversity that you perhaps could when you're hiring people remotely, and you're selling across multiple countries like you are, Neil, and Sean, you are. But you can achieve diversity through gender, through culture, through mindset, through introvert, extrovert, all those sorts of things that allow us to bring people with different ideas around the table to approach things differently and progress and move forwards and challenge each other in a positive way. So I think we all acknowledge it's a great thing. It's how do you, and maybe Joanna, I'll come to you on this, how do you do it intentionally? How do you put it on the table so that you as a leadership team are saying, look, diversity is important to us. I know when I go back to a couple of years ago, we had a team that went within the space of about 18 months, and we doubled in size, went from being heavily majority female to majority male. And I can't put my finger on why that happened and how that happened. And it certainly wasn't intentional. But before we knew it, we had a team of, say, 25 people, and 55, 60% of them were female. Then we had a team of 50, and well over half of those, probably closer to 2/3 were male. And not because we'd lost loads of people, but the recruitment drive had just been very male dominated. And, hand on heart, nobody went, let's hire more males, or let's not hire females. But we ended up in that scenario. And then you start to consciously look and go, we can't have a team that's too heavily this or too heavily that, and whatever it be, whether it's gender or anything else. So, John, I'll come to you on Funding Circle, because diversity at Funding Circle is, I know, because I've been there in the office and I've met a lot of your team, is a big thing. So how do you achieve it and make sure it's playing a positive role in culture across your team?
Takes a lot of effort, I'll be honest with you. I was actually reflecting on the fact that my own team of 8, there's only 2 females, and that's excluding me. So it is a bit of a shift, and we consciously try to make even our job adverts more, not necessarily female friendly, but friendly to anyone that might not even define themselves as female or male. Right now, I think we need to be really mindful that people aren't like putting categories anymore, right? Even though they constantly try to create them to try to people to fit a box. But that's a different question. So we consciously try to make something as simple as a recruitment drive, make sure that they appeal to different personalities. And that's something that you can achieve through even language. So getting different people from different backgrounds. I mean, as you probably can hear from my own accent, I'm not exactly British. I'm Portuguese. Getting people from different backgrounds, different genders, and like you were saying, introverts, extroverts, people with different life experiences even. To look at that job advert and see, would I be attracted to this? I know I'm doing the job now, but if I was going to apply for it now, would I be attracted to it? And I think that's quite a strength that not many businesses play to. I mean, we have this fountain of knowledge in-house. We don't need to go outside to find it necessarily. And Funding Circle is quite lucky to have a big, diverse team. And it's quite interesting to see how people from different backgrounds, different countries, genders, they bring a balance to the team. Because you find that if you only have males or only have females, I've worked in very heavy female-led environments, and I didn't like either. It's all about being that balance, making sure that people find that there's enough people around them that is different from them, that at the same time allows them to be themselves. So that sense of belonging, saying, you know what, that person is complete opposite of me, but we can get along because the person next to them is also quite different from what they are. So we're all allowed to be who we are and voice their opinions, and voice their strategies, their suggestions, what's going well, what isn't. And that's something really big for me, is allowing everyone to be who they are. And I try to consciously focus on that. It is a hard job, I'll be honest. But we definitely try to like consciously ask people, how do you feel? What could we change? I'm not the source of all truth, so or all knowledge. So I'm more than happy to get everyone's input on everything. And if anyone from my team is hearing this, please do challenge me if I'm not doing this to the high standard I try to set myself to.
There you go. Permission granted. Sean, I'm going to come back to you because what I don't want to do is keep rotating in the same order. So I'm just keep mixing it up. We've had Joanna talk about doing something consciously there. And Danielle earlier referred to surveys, pulse check-ins of people. Culture shift, we've kind of referred to that already. And I'm guessing there are moments in time, and have been moments in time, where you hire the wrong person occasionally, and that shifts culture, where you hire the right person and that shifts culture because they come in and they're starting to challenge right at the top straight away, and it raises eyebrows and people behave a different way. And there's positives and negatives that shift culture day to day, week to week, month to month. What are the things that you do or can do or would like to be doing in the future, maybe, to make sure that you are consciously controlling or across culture and the role it plays in the success of your team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever making a hire in the team, we actually just look at the team that we have now, from a kind of competencies point of view, whether that be technical, but also like everything really. As you said, it could be their attitude, and we maybe see what is missing, and then we look for those competencies throughout the interview process as something that might be that gap. But when I first came in, although we're a company based around telephone, I felt like we could be making a few more calls. Now, how do we do this? Do I pick up the phone? Well, that's one way, and they can see success and lead from the front. We could also hire people that are used to doing it, and they can see the outcomes, they can see the success. So we did that. Not just that, but that person was very, very hungry. There was a few BDRs at that time that kind of wanted their tummy tickled a little bit, and this person came in and they I think they said on day one in like a friendly way. He's from Norway. He was like, "I'm going to beat you all." He liked repeating that story as well, and everyone kind of went, "Oh shit!" But they liked it. Actually, one of the people on our team, they set their alarm. They told me 8 months later that they set their alarm for the next day as, "I'm going to beat that guy." And this is a healthy wanting to beat that guy. And they're like best friends. But it just kind of made everyone think like, okay, we're in a different environment here. And so, yeah, look what's missing and try and find it. But it is always going to be hit and miss. However many stages of the interview you have, there's going to be some things that sometimes you can't foresee. It's never perfect.
Yeah, it's an interesting notion, because we're talking about the fact that people come in and shift things and move the culture very quickly, but that's a positive thing. And one of the things I talk about a lot with my team is that we don't need to look for a culture fit. Back to your point, Joanna, people in a box. If we always hire the same way, we always get the same result. We're never moving forwards. Now, granted, we can move backwards by taking risks as well, but you learn and then you move forwards after that. And I think sometimes it's about not saying it fits within a box, but actually there's enough of a fit, but there's also enough outside the box as well to move us in a different direction. Danielle, you've got the most sizable outbound team of all of us here, and keen to understand whether you see big differences from even country to country, city to city, and whether you, because my view is I don't think you can have a culture and I could copy and paste that into Aircall or Happio or Funding Circle or Tipalti, and it works exactly the same as it does here. That there's variety in what works in different places based on the people and the team and the environment. So I'm keen to understand how that varies across your organization.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to the common competencies, it's the same, creativity, communication, and more. I think for each location that we have, I would say some people, like in the US, we're able to call more, whereas in the UK, there's also GDPR. So it's also kind of understanding each person's culture. So like in the US, we do a lot with Sendoso, where we send personalized gifts to prospects, whereas in the UK, it's more if they're a current customer or an open opportunity. So I would say it's also just understanding and respecting each person's culture, seeing what has worked with companies that they worked with in the past, and how we can embrace and evolve that to Palti so that they can continue to try out what does work for them as well.
Nice. And Neil, I know you have two roles. One is building the SDR team at Happio. You've done that in the past as well, but you also work with other businesses, helping them or consulting, helping them do something similar and advise around that. So you see lots of different things and have over the last few years, whereas a number of us are sort of sat in one place with one experience there. So I'm keen to sort of throw the same question at you. You must see a variety of ways in which culture is done that are equally as successful. And I'm keen to understand how broad is that? Because whenever I talk to people about culture, we all say the same things. We're all saying, oh, yeah, it's about belonging and it's about care. But actually, then I go into an outbound team and I go, they haven't got that. They're saying it, but they haven't got it necessarily. And that just shows how difficult it is. So I'm guessing there's there are different ways to achieve it in terms of where you might be.
Yeah, definitely. So I think like working with different companies that are either setting up their SDR teams or, commercial teams in general. I remember like when working for Zora like a couple of years back, where we initially had a US base and we launched an EMEA headquarters in London, and that was a founding team, and I was one of them. And then over periods of years, we launched like a French team, a German team, a team based out in Japan and also in APAC. And what I really liked about Zora was they would introduce the country heads to come over to spend like 2 or 3 weeks with our commercial teams in London to see how we operate. So it's kind of like a franchise model. This is currently how we do business. This is how we go to market, and this is how we build. And from there, the heads of those regions would then obviously come up with their own game plans, then obviously ask us our questions and opinions on these. And they would go back off to their regions and, build these out and these new functions. And every quarter, we'd always be having updates, how things are going, what the different nuances in business, what support do they need, etc. And it's with that, as Danielle said, that constant communication and collaboration that you're able to build those different cultures within the teams. And understandably, they're all going to be slightly different to an extent, but trying to follow the same sort of hymn sheet in terms of how we go to market. But also, with customers in those regions, they always would ask the question, well, do you have a presence in France? Do you have a presence or a data center in Germany? And understanding these things and sharing these best practices is how I've seen successful teams launch. And again, when I go into new companies and I'm advising them, I'm just saying, look, how things currently work, build this blueprint, but then have that playbook for new people coming through the door, but be open for change. And again, this is currently what we're doing at Happio, where we launched our New York office a couple of months back. We've got new SDRs and new account executives coming in, but they have the chance to chat with the Dutch team, see how we do it, but we love watching them grow and going into these new regions, and then we can learn things from them as well to then apply to our own.
So one of the things, that's brilliant. One of the things I'm really conscious that we do on this conversation is get into some specifics, because I think in my experience, when I talk to people about culture or I listen to people talk about culture, it stays very high level. It's about belonging. It's about people being happy. That's great. But how on earth do we do that? Like, what do we have to do to create that? Because we have a responsibility as an organization to give people the environment that makes them happy. We can't just ask them to be happy, and therefore they're good. So I'd just like to, and I'll come round in one at a time. Just like you to give me a couple of examples of things that you do, things that are part of your culture, things that you do in your outbound team, specific to the outbound team or generally across the organization, that you believe genuinely give people a better life because it's there. Doesn't mean it in isolation makes them happy, but actually they'd be in a worse situation or they'd be less happy if those things didn't exist. So bit of pressure on you to start thinking about things. Sean, I'll come to you first and throw you under the bus if that's all right. Can you give me 2 or 3 examples? What do you guys do to make people happier, to give them a sense of belonging, make sure that culture is a positive thing for them?
The one thing that's worked really, really well for us this year is we've done incentives which actually group one person, kind of like wacky races. You get one person from one team, one person from another. So maybe somebody from the French team will be with someone from the UK team. It might not have spent that much time together, and they'll be together competing together as a team. That really, really helped break silos. It got people talking to each other. They were all kind of going at it and learning about each other. And that was really, really nice to actually build like an EMEA culture. Another thing is I mentioned written and unwritten rules. I actually think if you hire for culture and you don't have some form of written rule, then you expect that everybody who comes in should understand the unwritten ones, which for me is a bit odd. So we have a teamship rule book where everybody has come together and on certain topics, whether it's like what you want to wear to the office or what time we turn up, with having a tidy desk policy. I put that one forward actually. They built it themselves, and if they build it themselves, they're going to buy into it more. They build it themselves. They all sign it when somebody comes in. We present it to them, and then we review it every quarter. And it means that somebody coming in hasn't got these questions in their head of how should I or shouldn't I behave or act. Like, it's something that everyone's bought in together. Yeah.
Thank you. Danielle, shall I come to you next?
Sure. So I can definitely echo off on Sean. So we do have like an SDR buddy system so that when you are a new SDR joining Tipalti, it doesn't have to be within the same location. We also do like virtual lunches, happy hours, but also like to do like cold calling. So they'll share like the Zoom sound screen so that they can kind of listen to one another and kind of see what the differences are. And then I would also say we actually have a really huge open door policy, and it's not just across like the SDR managers, but this is also CEOs, VPs, that we have SDRs that if we have a new VP who's joining, sometimes they meet them before I'm even able to meet with them. And they're like, oh, I met with your SDR. They're so awesome and more. And I think kind of building that culture and saying what it is, but also people actually seeing that and allowing people to give that feedback in order to kind of make that happen as well.
Nice. Joanna, could you give us some examples?
Yes, so kind of in line with what Sean was saying, we have a contracting session, ideally early on, especially when a new team is being formed, and I was lucky enough to have the bulk of my team join at the same time. So we did a contracting session, not only on what I was expecting from them, but on what they were expecting from each other and also from me. So everyone agreed to that at the end of the day. So it made them again saying, you know what, if I agree to that, if I was the one to put that forward, like Sean was saying, with even the desk policy, they will live up to it. At the same time, we also have buddy systems. We do a lot of shadowing each other in different teams as well. Each one of my team members has mentors, and all of these mentors are in different teams so that they can have access to a different wealth of knowledge. But one of the main things that I feel like it really makes them feel like they belong is to show them the impact of their work. From Funding Circle's perspective, whenever they make an outbound call, they're measured by how many applications they can actually get in, and also by having the correct documents to be put through. They're then passed to the account managers who follow through the rest of the process. So from the moment that they pass the application through, it's very easy to just lose contact with that prospect and in not really understanding what happened after that. So we make sure to have reports that show them at the end of that month, how much did your applications contribute to the business? How much did you make us? And I was showing them that the other day, and they were all quite amazed, like, oh, so I was the top person, I was the second top. And I don't think they understand how big an impact they have. And that's such a powerful tool, not to lose sight of, yes, you're targeted on how many calls you make, on how many handovers you make, but also what's the end game? How are you making us better? how are you helping the SME market, which is why a lot of them luckily join us as well
Yeah.
in the mission.
Yeah.
They really see eye to eye.
You know, I love that point, because I think so many people talk about openness, transparency, belonging. It came up within the first 5 minutes of this conversation 2 or 3 times. Yet you sit and talk to somebody in an SDR role who's multiple layers from company strategy, and they don't know what their purpose is. They don't know what what's success. They know what number of calls they've got to make per day, or how many emails they've got to send, or how many meetings they're meant to book. But that's not purpose. That's a target. That's a KPI. That's a process. They don't understand the impact of that. They don't understand why they exist and the difference they're making to the organization. And when you talk to people about, hey, well, why don't you talk to them about your company goals? Where are you going? What are you trying to achieve? What's the part that they play in that? It's amazing the impact that can have for such a simple, small thing. Just joining the dots.
And even on someone else's work. So I'm organizing shadowing sessions with someone who's just in the funnel. So they're not even the people who are going to say, yes, this loan is going to be approved. They're working there, but they directly feed off whatever information we give them of the quality of the documents that we pass. So to give them visibility on, you know what, if you do a really good job, you're going to make this person's life so much easier. It brings, again, that sense of belonging. It's not just about having the impact at the end of the day. It's about making the person who's going to pick up this application after me, making them happy, making them feel, you know what, this is amazing. I'm going to be able to do a great job with this one.
Yeah, love it. Neil, you've probably got the graveyard shift here, because we've got so many good ideas out there. But anything else that you could bring to the table, things that you do to drive culture in a positive way?
100%. I've got a few, and if I overstep the time, tell me to shut up, and I'm cool with that. All right. I think it starts all at the beginning before they even start the job. So in the interview process, if I have a really great candidate that I do want to bring on board, it's setting the right expectations before they sign that contract. So typically what I ask towards the end of the interview is, what do you want to achieve in this role? What skills do you want to learn? And what other skills do you want to learn just outside of sales, you know, commercial tactics, etc. They asked this of me, and I said, if I can give this to you, then what can I expect from yourself? So we're kind of building an upfront contract before going into this role. And once they're successfully in, as part of the onboarding, as with the other leaders here, the first week of their onboarding is not to know about the product, the platform, or what we sell. It's to know our company and culture, and having meetings with heads of departments to understand, why does finance exist? What does customer success do? You know, how does product and tech work together in engineering? And I always say to the SDRs is, you're making friends here now, because at some point in the future, you're going to have to go to somebody and ask them a question, and you want to be able to approach them and know who that person is. In the actual operational week to week with SDRs, as I'm having one-to-ones, I may be training somebody how to do cold calling, or how to, you know, put a video prospecting sequence together. And off the back of those successes, if they've gained something new, what I ask them to do is share that success in a team meeting. So, you know, 2 slides, give them 5 minutes to say, what was the challenge before, what did they do, and what was the outcome from the back of that. And the reason why I think that's better than an SDR manager doing it is because I'm the manager, and sometimes they may look at me, well, it's because Neil said we had to do it. But if their peers can see their other peers gaining success, it motivates them more, and there's more of an internal buy-in to a new process and method. And lastly, we have like a global company meet every Friday called Demo and Beers, where the whole company connects together, and we also celebrate key wins on deals. And what the SDRs are now asked to do is to help us understand globally, how did we penetrate that account? What prospecting did we do? And how did we work with our co-pilot, aka our account executive, to have a dynamic duo? And the very last thing that I do, Owen, is we all have internal mentors, and we have leaders, and we've got experienced people. But I encourage my SDRs to go outside of our organization to other companies to find advice, best practices, and learnings, and then bring that back to the team. Because, yeah, we have a wealth of knowledge here, but there is so much more out there on LinkedIn, events like this. People can learn from online resources so much more than they did before.
Love that. And it's a really fantastic point around, in the middle of there, you talked about the celebration. And I think particularly we move towards a remote a lot more. One of the things I've moaned about for 1.5 years is the fact that in outbound sales, the highs have got lower and the lows have got lower. So when we're getting rejected for 2 or 3 hours in a row and getting no positive conversations, which happens even with the best of salespeople, there's nobody to pick you up. You're bouncing off yourself. You're trying to do that by yourself, or you're trying to do it virtually, which, let's face it, is a, you know, it is a lesser way of doing it. However much we want to convince ourselves it's convenient, all that kind of stuff. we get energy from people, right? That's how most of us get energy to lift us when we're low. It's very hard to do that by yourself. Equally, the highs are lower because you can't high five anyone anymore. You know, you can't get off the phone and celebrate in the same way. You go to, I remember when we signed our first contract working in lockdown last year, and I literally stood up off my chair and went, there's no point in doing that, is there? It's a silly little thing, but the highs are lower and the lows are lower. And I've been preaching this for the last 18 months. Celebrating, and it can be the smallest thing, somebody's first positive conversation, somebody's first pipeline, first proposal, first meeting booked. It doesn't have to be the revenue piece. It can be the tiniest little thing, the fact they have more conversations in a morning than they've had in a morning before. You know, you could always find things that are firsts, bests, whatever it might be, and celebrating those and taking the time to, you know, a little text message, a little Slack, whatever it is, or a phone call, or just in the old days, it was a pat on the back, wasn't it? But, you know, all that kind of stuff just goes such a long way. So if you're listening to this, my advice would be never forget that piece. Never forget to say well done to people proactively and to celebrate that publicly and make a thing of it as well. I'm keen to get your opinion. Have you all got like a pen and paper in front of you? Bit of fun. If not, we can do it without pen and paper.
Always.
Bit of fun, right? Like it. So if we think about the culture range, so with 0 out of 10 being soft, I'll use some funny phrases like lovey-dovey. I think we had a tummy tickle phrase earlier. Lots of tummy tickling. You're all right here. You've got plenty of time to ramp. Don't worry about it. We're going to make you really comfortable, wrap our arms around you, and you're part of the family, right? Now, the skeptics in the world would say, too soft. If someone has, you know, too many passengers on that journey, all that kind of stuff. The positives, people might say that's how you build long-term working relationships. You build a family culture and you get the best out of people long-term, etc., etc. Extreme other example, Wolf of Wall Street. Hard. It's not about the people. It's about tough sales. It's about, you know, get results or out the door. It's about results, right? And look, there's lots of gray area in the middle, I know. One thing I've learned, and I'm going to set a precedent here, is that every time I ask this question, and I don't use this last caveat bit, everyone answers 5. So you're not allowed to answer 5. Where would you say the right mark is for an outbound team? So in an inbound team, you might argue it's different. In an operational team, it might be different. But if you go harder to softer, however you want to refer to, 0 being the soft, family friendly, 10 being the hardcore, old-fashioned sales culture, where would you want it to sit out of 10? And don't say 5. Write it down. I just want to see what the variance is and whether we can accept that we're trying to make a compromise here and accept that we might lose a bit of one for potentially the other. And maybe then some of you might come back and debate with me whether you can achieve both perfectly. I don't know. Write a number down. I'm just keen to see what the variance is. I bet we get 4s and 6s. Right, Neil, put your number up on the screen. Can I see it? 7. Oh, interesting. Sean, what have you got?
I haven't got a pen and paper, but I've got fingers, so I'm going to go.
2. Oh, nice. Joanna? Can't see it. I can't see it. Oh, 4. No, is it 4? Yeah, it's a 4. Danielle?
I also put 4.
Okay, so we've got 2 4s, a 2 and a 7. Was that right? Love it.
And I had
Love
4
it.
before your caveats. So
well
proud of
done,
myself
well
right
done.
now.
So I've done that exercise in a room full of people, and we had over 80% of people put 5. I'm ruling out 5 again in the future. So hey, look, what's interesting there is that we've got a variety. I know that's a silly exercise because you can achieve both at the same time, hand in hand, but you kind of have to have a definition of who you are and how you want to be and how you want to be defined within culture. And the question I had earlier, I think it's been well demonstrated there, that there isn't a right setting. So I can't sit there and say Neil's working them a bit harder, maybe being a bit tougher on people, but getting a lesser result. Sean's being a bit softer on people, but getting a lesser result. You've both got hugely successful teams that are running just in different ways with different cultures. And I think that's a really good example of how it can be done differently. Joanna, before we went live, you talked about the remote element. I'm keen to just flip, because we've got about 15 minutes left, flip to talking about maybe some of the things we're talking about that are normal now, virtual lunches that weren't 18 months ago. We all have to shift our culture along. We've had to move it. We've had to change the way that we think. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you over the last 18 months with that? And what have you done to address those? Joanna, I'll stick with you as you raised it earlier.
I can't talk about the last 18 months because I unfortunately haven't been a manager for that long.
Mm.
So I'll stick to since August. It's actually been quite a big shift, not only because I've had different teams. From my original 4 team members, I only retained one, and then I had fairly new batch join now in September. But we just caught when we were out of lockdown, and now we're not necessarily in lockdown, but we're back to working fully remote. So the challenge really is on how to get them to still bond like they would have in the office. It's hard. And what I try to do is, alluding to what you were saying as well, is always celebrating the wins. We have what my husband would say, too many meetings, too many group meetings, but I feel like they're necessary. We have a stand up at 8:45 a.m. where we just chat about what we did over like last evening, any funny stories, and then we kind of go into the work flow just a few minutes after. And then over lunchtime, we always play some sort of game. I'm a big fan of drawing. Grew up with Pictionary as a child, so we play a lot of Scribblio. I did murder mystery, I think 1 or 2 days ago, just because I didn't have too much time. So I just did a quick riddle. It's just something to kind of lift them up and make them actually work as a group. And then you get all sorts of little nuggets of banter out of that. And you start seeing people's personality shine through when they're just not necessarily being judged on what they're doing for work, but what just they're doing as a game. And it's really when you start seeing, like, say, those people who are difficult to get a smile out of, or who are just not necessarily as open as you are yourself. And this, I think, it has massively helped them bond. But at the same time, Slack channels, even though we have about 1,000 of them, trying to use the team one as a collaborative space. And I know that they do that between themselves, even without me interacting. Because at some point I was getting all of them coming to me with questions, and I said, a lot of times you're just looking for validation. Go and ask that on the team channel. Go and ask one of your colleagues. You actually know this. So kind of empowering them to take on that challenge and take ownership of what they're doing and the responsibility for what they're doing and for their own development, for that matter. But this is what I'm finding, that you need to put them in a situation where it's not just work related. Yes, you're with your colleagues, but get them a bit more at ease. It has helped massively for us.
Sean, I'm keen to come to you on this, because one of the observations I have is that organizations like ours, where everybody was physically present in one space, have found it more difficult on average than organizations who had lots of sites anyway. So a lot of their cross-team communication was already done virtually. So there was less of a shift. I don't know whether you feel that with Aircore, because you've got multiple countries anyway.
I mean, at the time when in the very first lockdown, we were very Paris and New York. And to be honest, it was one of those where on the first day we were kind of like, well, I just said to the team, well, I've not done this before. Has anyone else been in a global pandemic? Like, we're all in this together in the sense that we've not done this before. Let's just work toward little gains. Hey, let's prove that we can work from home effectively. We might be able to work from home long term. That seems silly looking back now. In this more recent one, we actually opened the office in Sydney during the lockdown, which was quite cool. But then, as you say, now we've got the DAC team in Berlin. We've got the UK team in London. I think it seems less scary because you feel like everybody's, again, you got that specificity. Everyone's kind of looking after themselves in their own group. They're communicating their own group. I'm not worried. Obviously, I like it when everyone's in the office. I think all the BDRs do too, which is nice. We don't force them to be, but they all turn up because they want to be. But I'm not worried about the lockdown, because the hardest thing I think about the lockdowns are, with anything, you come into a meeting, you kind of have to read the room a little bit. You might come into the meeting wanting to motivate everybody, but you realize everybody just needs a bit of a bit of love, and it can be quite hard to read the room on Zoom. But then there's other things, like I'm wondering here, but there's one thing that really bugged me during the first part of the lockdown was when you're sat there and you got people typing to each other and laughing and all this kind of stuff, and you just we actually said quite early on, it's like, it's quite tough from like the challenges that we face as managers as well as you. Like, let's all just be in this together, and like let's be mindful. Let's talk to each other within this group, and let's stop messaging each other on Zoom when people are talking. I had to get that in because it really did bug me.
So, it's interesting because we, on the most part, and Danielle and Neil, I don't know whether you were in disparate teams or sort of physically present teams before. We'll touch on that in a minute. I'll give you a chance to give us some context. But I think pre-COVID, it was very much acknowledged that culture was twofold. It was the things that you do together and the things that you give. And often those things that you give were physical. So, you know, free fruit in the office, table tennis, beers on a Friday, all that kind of stuff. Giving people beer on a Friday got harder because you've got to send it to 100 addresses, right? You can't physically do that in the same way. Ping pong table's been sat there dormant for a year. You know, all this sort of stuff has gone. So now we have to over-index. And Joanna, I'm thinking particularly about, you know, I've been to the Funding Circle office several times. Beautiful restaurant, cafe, ping pong table. It feels great when you walk in, you get that energy. That ain't Funding Circle right now. It's not the same anymore. So you have to over-index now on the things that you do together, the experiences that you have. And I think to your point, Sean, there about let's be present then, let's be engaged, let's be a part of that. Danielle, you were talking earlier about the virtual lunches, virtual coffees, buddy systems, all these sorts of things start to become more and more important as we kind of can't rely on those things that we give anymore. Danielle, I'm keen to hear like your journey and just a little bit of narrative around how you've shifted those things.
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually just in the UK to help expand the office. So I'm actually heading back to the US in January. And so in the US, we, before the London office was open, I went from hiring 5 new SDRs to it's your second week, we're all working from home. And so it was a lot of making sure that the training that we had, we built out SDR playbooks. We made sure that onboarding was still efficient. But I also did a lot of contests. So I did like MTV Cribs and Pimp My Ride, and that actually allowed people to show their homes or their cars and their personalities, and whoever like created the most like funniest video or whichever won $100 in that sense. But I also just encourage my team like, hey, you know, we have an inbound team, we have an outbound team. Like you want to get better with cold calling, why don't you meet with this person on this other team? And then just holding them accountable, like, hey, how did that meeting go? I would also say that a lot of it is also like just doing like walk one-on-ones, making sure like whether they're in their front porch or in their backyard. I usually do like when I'm back in the US, I'm usually walking on like our first call. So we do AM stand-ups. We also do like Happy Monday stand-ups and end of week. Where it's everyone of the team, and like our VP of sales development is one who's kicking off the call. For the end of weeks, we have a lot of highlights where we have all of the teams together, no matter like which location. And I know with the UK, it's a different time zone, but we make sure that we still highlight them and that the team is still saying like, oh, hey, I heard that you were able to do X on LinkedIn, like congrats and more. So definitely still allowing them to feel included. But I think the most important part is checking in with your team members. It's not just about how work is, it's how's things going at home. How are you doing? I know that we're now going back into working from home. How did you adjust last time? How can I support you in that? And just checking in on them and saying like, hey, I remember you said you were streaming Game of Thrones. What season are you on now? How is that going? And just making sure that they too are feeling supported in this transition again.
Yeah, nice. Neil, keen to get your thoughts. How much harder has building a productive, positive culture in an outbound team become with it remote, in your opinion? Or has it got, is it harder? Is it easier? I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think in the last 2 or 3 years, working for a few different companies and being a manager and a coach, I've found it harder. Like a lot of new people are coming from different industries, different walks of life and coming into tech sales. And they, may not have any understanding as to how this is going to run and how their careers are going to be impacted, etc. And motivating people. And I think I learned a very hard lesson whilst I was at Happyo. So I started with the organization back in May, and obviously the team are based in Amsterdam, and the VP of sales said it'd be great to have you here locally, but because I've got my little boy in the UK, I can't leave and I can't emigrate. And they went into a lockdown in Dan whilst we were out of lockdown. And I was always working with the team and having like our meetings and, chats, talking about numbers, performance, etc., etc. And what I found really hard was at the end of every one-to-one, the computer would go, Windows shut, Hangout done. I couldn't sense the vibe of that person after that call. Were they happy with that feedback? Did they feel confident moving forward in what they were trying to achieve? And I'd always like kind of rack my brain. I'd be chatting to my VP saying like, it's really hard to deal with this remote team because they're in Dam, I'm in the UK, hundreds of miles away, and I can't come over at the minute. And that ran for about 5 months. And then I finally had the blessed opportunity to come out to Amsterdam, finally meet them face to face after 5 months, give them a hug, shake their hand, you know, all COVID safe. And one of my reps set me down and I just said, look, I've been working with you and I just want to know how can I be a better manager? And one of my beautiful reps said to me, he said, Neil, you need to understand is that we're not a remote team, you're a remote manager. We're all here in the office, right? We get to see each other every day. We get to high five, but we don't get to have your physical presence here. So we have a mandate where I come out at least once or twice a month now to make sure that I meet with the team, I'm here with them. And I also have certain members in the team that have been here for quite a while that can always give me a sense check of how the team are feeling. Are there any problems? Are there any, you know, hiccups or things going wrong? And like kind of flag it to me to ensure that, you know, we're making sure everybody's comfortable and safe. So I trust upon my team to let me know how things are going when I'm not here, and also have that opportunity to, you know, meet them face to face whenever I can. I've been to Amsterdam 3 times in the last 2 months and I love coming out here, but it's been harder. And I think with lockdown, things become a bit harder. But similar to Danielle, like having your stand-ups and wrap-ups. I remember last year when I was at insurance lockdown, I had this thing in my head where I was totally fine working from home because I've worked for SaaS companies for 10 years. Everything's done via Zoom. That's how you do your demos. What's so hard to take into consideration with that? But I forgot that these people hadn't been through that before. So I had to show a level of empathy towards that. And then we brought personal things into our meeting. So I'm a big believer in mindfulness and meditation. So at the beginning of every week, I'd ask my reps, what are 3 things that you're grateful for today? And at the end of the wrap-ups.
Oh, I think we've lost Neil there. We lost Neil. That's fine. Sean, I'll get Neil to finish off if he gets back in. Sean, can I come to you? You gave us a 2 score out of 10 on my whatever you want to refer to it as ratio.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, there's one thing that I thought might come up that hasn't, as we talked about remote, which is around SDR mental health, well-being, sort of emotional journey that we've all been. That's definitely got harder on average. The more and more people I talk to, the more, and everyone's nodding now. Do you think you've moved down to a 2 because you felt like the environment has needed that, and that's the leader that's needed to be there? Have you always been at that level? I'm just keen to get some commentary around whether you think you've had to shift according to the movement in the market.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to actually consider whether it has shifted. I'd actually say no. I think I think I've been quite consistent with the 2. Before, my first question in any one-to-one is always how are you, but then asking twice and like really actually wanting to know. And we spend sometimes, if it is needed, we'll spend the whole one-to-one just talking about that, because that's going to be the thing that actually gets them to do the things, the standards we've already set in place before. I think what became tricky as a manager is when you're sat, no one wants to be a dashboard manager. And when you're sat at home and you only have dashboards to go at to understand what people are actually doing, obviously there's a lot of trust involved. If you see that things aren't happening from a inputs side of things, the temptation can be you sat there thinking, why are you not doing this? But really, it's always that, like, is there anything stopping you from being able to do this? Always, always, always. And that becomes more and more important. If I think on the one occasion I forgot to ask it, obviously there's something going on. And I think it's actually made me a better manager. I think I would have said I was a 2 before, but probably been a bit closer to a 3 or a 4. But not saying that that's better or worse, because you said there's the sliding scale and it all works. But I'm more confident with my 2 now.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's clearly a hot topic. So good to have you back, Neil. Apologies we lost you, but we've moved on from that, if that's all right. Just to keep things moving. But I do think that mental health piece is really interesting, that actually we've all had to become, you used it earlier, Neil, therapists, and actually more so than ever before, now has that become an important leadership skill, that we are good listeners, that we're able to recognize when people aren't completely right, because it's happening more and more, and have processes, systems, things in place to address that. And I think, you know, maybe as a wrap up point, we should be saying that to people, that this isn't just about performance. This just isn't just about forcing people to be happy with doing nice things. You can do some great stuff, and I, you know, talk about culture versus climate. You can do some great stuff to make a positive culture, but someone can still feel bad. They can still have an off day, an off week, an off month. They can feel low, and it might be out of work, it might be in work, it might just be a biological way that they feel at the moment. That is just us as humans, and acknowledging that has become more and more accepted, as it should, and it's something that we should embrace and be moving forwards with. And now more than ever plays a huge role in culture. Guys, I'm conscious of time. We're bang on 3 o'clock. Before we wrap up, can I just get you just to really quickly say two things? Who should talk to your company? So Sean, I'll come to you because you're at the top and we'll go round. Who should talk to Aircall? How can they get in touch with you?
Anybody that wants to make more sales over the phone, which are hopefully all SDRs, you can get in touch with me. I mean, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or you can go onto our website. We also have a free trial, so you can actually see how good it is for itself. That's a nice little plug, isn't it? Yeah,
good on you. Danielle.
I would say if you care about your finance team and you want to help empower them, to Palti, we do that. We help streamline your day-to-day, from onboarding to paying to tax compliance and more. So if you ever have any friends within the finance team who may be the ones that are working longer hours, Tapalti is here to help. You can definitely reach out to me at Tapalti or Danielle.benavides@Tapalti, or find me on LinkedIn.
Lovely. Joanna, coming to you next.
Well, for me, it's more if you're a business owner, if you know of a business owner in the small and medium space, more than happy to entertain any messages on LinkedIn. Otherwise, the team is here to help on 0800 048 2467.
Nice. Pick up the phone. Love it. Neil.
Yeah. So if you're looking to make your employees happier people by connecting them globally, and you're looking for a social intranet that enhances your Google Workspace ecosystem, we're the people for you. If you want any more information, just ping me on LinkedIn or just email me at neil@happyo.com.
Lovely stuff. Guys, thank you to each and every one of you. Really, really fun discussion. Loads of good ideas in there. And what's nice is that we're all doing it differently and moving in the right direction. So, you know, this isn't a copy and paste job. This is about finding what's right for you, but some fantastic ideas in there. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. And to anybody who's listening to this live or watching it live, thank you for joining us. And if you're watching it back, thank you for taking your time out of your day to watch it back. Really appreciate it. I'll let you crack on with your day, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
it was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.